Question number 9, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Trade and asks, which stakeholder groups have been briefed as to the draft content of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement since the completion of the last round of negotiations in July, and which groups have been briefed as to the process going forward for the agreement?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Todd McClay.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister has made a number of public comments on the status of the TPP negotiations, including this week from Kuala Lumpur. New Zealand's position on the release of the draft text of TPP has not changed. The text has not been shared with stakeholders as negotiations are still continuing, and it and other negotiating proposals are subject to confidentiality undertakings agreed by all TPP countries. But, Mr. Speaker, the Government continues to meet and brief stakeholders about the specific areas of interest in the negotiation. Since the Maui meetings, this has included meetings with representatives from business groups, agricultural exporters and the IT sector.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the groups that's been briefed as to the process going forward for the TPP include National Party MPs. And if so, can he explain why Dr. Shane Retty, the Deputy Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, told the Northern Advocate that, and I quote, "The agreement comes before Parliament and opposition parties and select committees for debate and modification"?
Mr. Speaker,
the Honourable Todd McClay, either of those two supplementary questions.
On behalf of the Minister has briefed a number of different groups, including arranging for negotiators from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade to brief the Foreign Affairs and Trade Select Committee of Parliament. I note that the member is speaking of a member of that committee. I'm not aware of what information was provided to that committee.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Will Parliament be able to modify the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement after the Government has signed it?
Mr. Speaker,
the Honourable Todd McClay.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, the member needs to be careful not to get ahead of himself. There is still a negotiation underway, and the Government has been clear that we will only sign the TPP agreement where it's in the overall good for New Zealand and the New Zealand economy. But what I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, is should we be successful in negotiating a high-quality agreement good for New Zealand, it will follow the same parliamentary process as other similar agreements.
Order.
Point of order. Which one?
It's a
James Shaw. Dr. Russell Norman.
It's
point
a
of
very.
order.
It's a very simple.
Order.
It's a very simple.
Order. And I can anticipate the point of order. I'm going to invite the member to ask that question again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Parliament be able to modify the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement after the Government has signed the agreement?
The Honourable Todd McClay.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, the member needs to be careful not to get ahead of himself. There is no agreement under TPP yet. Should there be an agreement, it would have to be in the overall best interest for New Zealand for the Government to sign it, and the process will be the same as every other trade agreement that's put before the Parliament.
I'll allow the member an additional supplementary question.
Will Parliament be able to modify the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement after the Government signs it?
Mr. Speaker,
the Honourable Todd McClay.
On behalf of the Minister, Mr. Speaker, the process that will be followed for TPP, should it be successfully negotiated and concluded, will include a national interest assessment, followed by enacting legislation. That's the normal process that we follow in this House with all agreements. It includes the Korean Free Trade Agreement, the China Free Trade Agreement, and all other agreements that have been negotiated successfully in the interest of New Zealand.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, it was a very simple question. The Minister is not answering a very simple question.
It is a very simple question that's now been repeated twice. I see little point in repeating the question a third time, but the member certainly has an additional supplementary question if he wants to use it. Dr. Russell Norman.
Will Parliament be able to modify the text of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement after the Government signs it? Yes or no?
Speaker.
The Honourable Todd
On
McRae.
behalf of the Minister, I refer the member to my previous questions. This agreement, should be concluded, will follow all other agreements that have come through this House. The agreement will go before the Finance and Expenditure, the Foreign Affairs Committee, that will be able to put a report back to Parliament.
Point of order, Dr Russel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek your clarification and direction. What can the opposition do when a minister simply refuses to answer a question?
Order. Well, the minister didn't refuse. He gave an answer which didn't answer the question. I agree with that. There is nothing I can do. It is the responsibility of the minister to answer a question in this House. I judge whether the question's been answered. On either occasion, I didn't think it had been satisfactorily addressed, so I gave the member additional questions to use. It'll be now for the public and this House to judge the quality of the answer that's been given by the minister.
Point of order.
Point of order, Dr Russel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table a statement from Dr Shane Retty with regard to the process for ratification to the TPP dated August 15, 2015. It's not publicly available.
Is it a statement by Dr Shane Retty or a newspaper article?
It is a press release released to the Northern Advocate and nobody else by Dr Shane Retty dated 15 August 2015.
Order. On the basis that the members informed me correctly that it was released to a particular provincial newspaper and not released more widely, I will put the leave and it'll be over to the House to decide. Leave is sought to table that particular statement. Is there any objection? Yes. There is objection. Question. Order. Order. Question number 10, Barbara Kerrigan.